Good evening, my dear colleagues. Welcome to Inget Zoom Series 36. Today, our guest is a friend of mine. In fact, I feel so proud to call her my friend,
Thank you.
is Associate Professor Dr. Betil Eröz. Betil Hocam currently works at the Middle East Technical University. She has a PhD in second language acquisition and teaching and an MA in English language and linguistics from the University of Arizona. She teaches courses focusing on language teaching methodology, speaking and presentation skills, practicum, sociolinguistics, qualitative research, and reading. This evening, the title of her talk is Why Reflect When You Can Just Think? And the subtitle is Implications of Reflection for Learners, Teachers, and Trainers. Thank you, dear Betil Hocam, for accepting to be here, to be our guest, and welcome again. So the screen is all yours. And I know that it's going to be a wonderful talk. Let's enjoy.
Thank you very much, Hocam, for this very kind introduction. I'm very happy to be here, everyone, to be a guest of the Inget Zoom series. And Hocam, thank you very much for the invitation. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about reflective learning, reflective teaching, and reflective in-service teacher training and pre-service teacher education, mainly in ELT in this Zoom series. An overview of my presentation, as you can see, first I'll talk about reflection, what it is, the definitions, the significance of it, and then I'll move on to reflective learning, then reflective teaching, and I'll finish with reflective training. So this is my plan. Okay. First, what is reflection? And I think some of the concepts will be familiar to those of you who've been coming to these series, because Hocam have been talking about these issues also. So sorry for any repetitions, Hocam, excuse me for that. First, I'll start with the definition of reflection. What is reflection? Is reflection thinking? Are they the same thing? Well, actually, reflection, not all thinking is reflective in nature, actually. So what's the difference between these two? And how does thinking become reflective? In order to address these issues, we need to understand certain criteria to be reflective. Carol Rogers presents 4 criteria for reflection. First, reflection is a meaning-making process that helps a learner move from one experience into the next experience with a deep or deeper understanding of its relationship with and connection to other previous experiences and ideas. Second, reflection is a systematic, rigorous, and disciplined way of thinking, and it has roots in scientific inquiry. Thirdly, reflection requires attitudes that value the personal and intellectual growth of oneself and of others. So in this sense, it has reciprocal benefits for all members or stakeholders in the learning and teaching process. And finally, reflection needs to happen in a community, in social interaction with others. So these criteria are essential, especially when we're talking about reflective learning and reflective teaching. In the last criterion, as you can see, we see an emphasis on collaboration. So I will move into collaborative reflection at this point. Rogers highlights the benefits of collaborative reflection in learning and teaching by identifying some factors. First of all, it's an affirmation of the value of one's experience. When in isolation, critical issues, I'm talking about classroom issues, may be easily dismissed as unimportant or go on unnoticed or maybe forgotten. For example, when we have a problem in the classroom and we share it with other teachers, we can see that there may be some common issues with a certain group of learners. If we don't, then it will just go unnoticed and it's not dealt with. It's not handled at that point. So that's why it's important to collaborate. Collaborative reflection also helps us look at things from a new perspective. Other community members working with us may offer alternative meanings to lived experiences, ours and theirs, and they broaden our field of understanding. Also, collaborative reflection provides motivation to engage in the process of inquiry, in taking action. The self-discipline that's required for systematic and rigorous reflection may be difficult to sustain, alone, considering like the overwhelming demands of a teacher's, daily schedule, all the courses that they have to teach, all the students that they have to deal with. We may just skip that, but when we are accountable to a group, for example, there's a project and we're part of it, we have certain tasks to complete, otherwise what will the others say? So we feel a kind of responsibility towards others, and that's more compelling than the responsibility we feel to just ourselves. So this could be something as simple as giving feedback to a classmate's performance, or as complex as being part of a team to carry out an action research project to enhance instruction at a program. Okay. Is it easy to reflect on our own learning and teaching progress? Can everyone do it? The answer is yes, but according to American educational reformist and philosopher John Dewey, there are some attitudes that an individual needs in order to be able to do effective reflection. And these are wholeheartedness, directness, open-mindedness, and responsibility. And I'll follow Rogers' explanations for these to clarify how Dewey relates them to reflection. Wholeheartedness is having enthusiasm about one's subject matter. And it's curiosity about and enthusiasm for the subject that one is teaching, in our case, English language, or learning. Without these, neither the teacher nor the learners have energy or fuel to carry out reflective inquiry. Yeah, so total engagement with the subject matter is what Dewey refers to as wholeheartedness. Then we have directness. And directness is not being self-conscious or distracted or constantly preoccupied with how others perceive our performance. It refers to a genuine kind of self-confidence, something that's, not arrogant kind of self-confidence. An individual who believes in the validity of his or her own experience without worrying too much about what others may think of him or her is considered to have directness, according to Dewey. Open-mindedness is being receptive to new ways of seeing and understanding phenomena. Open-mindedness is not blindly accepting all ideas without intelligent critique, but rather being willing to entertain, different perspectives. It's also the ability to consider the possibility of error in the beliefs that are dearest to us, which is very difficult for people to do, and acknowledging the limitations of our own perspective. Again, challenging issues because they hurt the ego. Responsibility then helps to bind and ground wholeheartedness, directness, open-mindedness together. So it's like the glue that keeps the first three attitudes together. It's the reality check that poses the question, what are the real life implications of my thinking? So this implies that reflection leads to action, which causes change and enhancement of practice eventually. That's the aim. The four attitudes comprise the essential constituents of what Dewey calls readiness to engage in reflection. Carol Rogers adds curiosity and the desire for growth to this list. She argues that without these two, the courage required for truly reflective work would be absent. So reflective thinking is not as easy or as straightforward as it may seem. It requires intrinsic motivation and definitely dedication. Okay, I'll move on to, as our first subcategory, why and about what and how learners may be reflective in their language learning. Learners may go through lessons, without understanding everything. We're all familiar with that, right? Without, having a grasp of what's everything that's going on in the classroom, or without realizing whether they have acquired the targeted skills and content knowledge. I think you have all had students who come to you at the end of the semester saying, they have failed the proficiency exam, for example, and say, "Hocam, it went so well. I don't know what was wrong with it. Oh, how did I fail the exam?" Because they have no idea during the process, what went wrong during the process. But if they're guided, during their own learning process, not evaluated at the end of it, they may develop an awareness for their strengths and weaknesses as learners, and again, during the process, work more consciously on their actual needs and weaknesses. So they, in that way, take responsibility for their own learning, which leads them to become autonomous learners and enables them to handle their own challenges with language learning. So we're actually giving them wings when we are teaching them how to reflect their own learning process. So how does reflective learning affect learning outcomes? Champignon summarized different studies to give an answer to this question. They say, first, reflective learning enables students to direct and monitor their own learning process. It enables students to have an in-depth understanding of experiences and a stronger capacity for using knowledge in new situations. Secondly, reflective learning allows students to direct and monitor their own learning process. Next, reflective learning leads students to awareness of emotions and thoughts, which can encourage them to think in new ways and help them develop alternative explanations for learning experiences. And finally, the learning outcomes of reflective learning help students develop self-awareness and awareness of how their beliefs differ from those of others. Okay. So with this, we'll move on to reflective learning when and who. So what is a good time for reflection for learners? And who helps students through this process? Students may engage in reflection while working on in-class tasks, such as exercises, pair or group work activities, activities like competitions, presentations, etc. They may also reflect on their own progress while working on individual or group tasks outside the classroom. For example, when they are outlining a composition for class as homework, or doing research on a topic, finishing their homework, preparing for an exam, or compiling portfolios for summative assessment. Those are good times for students to understand where they're at in the learning process. In their reflective learning process, their teacher may help them by providing oral and written feedback on classroom tasks and exercises, as well as by making corrections on their exams and assignments. Their peers may also contribute to this reflection by giving feedback on assignments, tasks, or exercises, or while collaborating on group projects. And finally, most importantly, I think, they may use guidelines and criteria provided by the teacher or the classroom materials to evaluate and correct themselves, which is their permanent kind of learning. But how do learners reflect on things specifically? What do they do? What are some activities teachers may use to help students engage in reflective learning? I'll give you some suggestions from Aydoğmuş and Kurnaz's experimental study, a very recent study, 2021, done on fifth graders. This study reports that learning through reflective tasks yielded positive results, which means higher retention scores for learning for the students. In the experimental group, they use reflective teaching activities like warm-up activities, learning contracts with the students, writing learning journals, reflective journals, feedback and correction, building concept maps with the students, asking reflective questions, having reflective discussions, and preparing a development file. And I'll just go very quickly over what these activities are. So warm-up activities are like starting the class with visual stimuli, open-ended questions, some kind of interesting information that would trigger the schemata of the students and get their attention. Learning contracts are contracts signed by the students and the teacher, indicating that the students are going to take responsibility for their own learning, and they're going to make sure that they're going to work on developing their own learning skills themselves. So it's just giving the students that chance. Writing learning journals or reflective journals are like diaries for students. They record their personal responses, their questions, their feelings, opinions, thought about different issues, or about class content. Then we have the feedback and correction. This may be teacher guided or student guided, classroom activities or feedback and correction sessions with the students. Then building concept maps, having like a visual map of the concepts covered in the course and finding a link between those, how they overlap. For example, having like mind maps when we do, brainstorming charts, for example. Reflective discussions are asking students about their feedback, like getting constructive feedback from the students about their learning progress. Then asking students some questions, some reflective questions. What are reflective questions? For example, what do I know about this? What don't I know about this? What do I need to learn this issue? Or how long will it take me to accomplish this? What are my resources? Where do I find them? What should I do next? So these are all questions that they ask the students. Then the students have a preparing development file assignment, which is students having a chance to revise their previous work, thinking about their problems, and then working on previous assignments and revising them and reviewing them with fresh eyes. And finally, they had self-assessment tasks with the students. The students were encouraged to self-assess and reflect on their experience with reflective learning activities. And that actually gave a critical perspective on student learning to the researchers. So these were some activities that they used that were effective for them. And I think these are some activities that we can all use in our classrooms. Students may also make use of technological tools, to produce language and also test their hypotheses about their own production and learning, and, to check their progress and self-correct when necessary, which again leads to autonomy in learning, which is very important. They may display their language proficiency and production, by means of their personal blogs, wikis on a certain subject. They may have their own YouTube channel, where they compile and share their tasks, other recreational language use publicly. Considering the generation Z that we have, that everybody wants to be a YouTuber or a hacker, I think that would actually make sense, to use such tools. They may also use technology for more passive language use. They may use reference materials to check their spelling, grammar, punctuation, pragmatic use of language. I mean, these are everywhere. When you start YouTube, the ads for Grammarly come immediately. So they're everywhere. They're available to everybody. There are online, resources like dictionaries. They have definitions, but they also have like pronunciation, the audio files for them, or other audiovisual aids, dialogues, and the audio files that go with them. So these tools encourage autonomous learning, making them more independent as learners, and therefore they are more in control of their own learning progress. Another way for learners to reflect on and assess their own learning effectively and their peers' learning subjectively is by examining the evaluation criteria by which they are to be evaluated. I mean, we have to, no matter how idealistic we are, we have to accept the fact that, grades are a fact of life for students, and they are usually students are usually motivated by grades more than anything. So sharing grading rubrics and evaluation criteria for tasks, assignments, and projects not only helps students with planning, but also keeps them on task and focused on the expected learning outcomes. So it gives them a fair chance to prepare for their tasks. To illustrate this, I would like to show you this rubric. I use this for my speaking class. For this assignment, for example, it's called Sing, Recite, or Deliver. My students either sing a song or recite a poem or deliver a piece of news. So the criteria and descriptors, as you can see, here for each level over here, are very clear and they are distinctive. They're different from each other. So they know that, for example, in order to get an excellent score on pitch and speech clarity, their voice has to be high enough, for everybody to hear and understood clearly by their audience. So they could record their presentation. This is an option that I always give to my students in their speaking in speaking classes. They can watch it, listen to it, and see if they meet this criteria. They may get feedback from their peers about this issue. And depending on the feedback and their own reflection, they may revise their work. So if you give them the criteria and also give them a chance to revise their work, they may actually use that autonomous learner initiative and work on it a little bit more. Here's another rubric. I use this for my students' TED Talk. My students prepare TED Talks, like short TED Talks in my class. The main points of evaluation here, like pronunciation and expression, content and development, nonverbal communication, and outfit. This was before, of course, online education where we don't have any outfit or body language. We just have like facial expression and that's all. The main points and the elements that come under these main points are very clearly listed and they are scored. So they know exactly what will be looked at, in their presentation. So sometimes teachers are not that fond of very analytical rubrics, but I find it fair for students to take a look at these and know what I will be listening for and what I'll be looking at. So I actually like these detailed and analytical rubrics. So with this, students have access to the criteria before they prepare the assignment. They use this rubric to get and give peer feedback, so they can help each other with their reviews. It also helps them, compare their performance with that of their classmates. So they have a sense of reference also. Okay, now we'll move on to reflective teaching. Burton indicates that reflection in teaching is good practice because it gives the teacher the opportunity for lifelong professional development. They become critiques of teaching in general, and they make better informed teaching decisions in and for class. Dewey suggests that teachers need to reflect systematically on their working context, resources, and actions, and apply what they learn from reflection in everyday and long-term decisions about instruction. Reflective teaching is being constantly alert of the circumstances of teaching and the issues that arise during teaching. Donald Schoen, who's a more contemporary philosopher, develops the concept of reflective practice. And he claims that teachers make judgments and decisions in the classroom all the time, every second, and based on their previous experience and knowledge of content, of course. Schoen suggests 3 reflective behaviors, and a 4th one is added by Thomas Farrell. These are, first, knowing in action. It draws attention to the immediate link between knowing and doing. It refers to the ability to respond immediately and automatically, this is what we usually do, to unexpected events during the lesson. In the process of teaching, we all need to make split-second decisions. There's little time to sit, ponder, analyze, and react. So we have seconds. So knowing in action refers to the smooth and familiar routines of action that are done skillfully, mainly by experienced teachers. Reflection in action refers to the spontaneous decisions, adaptations and changes teachers make in the course of the lesson while teaching, using their knowledge and action ability based on their experience and their training. Reflection in action captures the moments, following and preceding a classroom decision made by the teacher. Something as simple as changing the seating situation in the classroom because the activity isn't working. Reflection on action occurs retrospectively after the teaching, when the teacher looks back and identifies critical moments in the classroom concerning what went well and what needs refining about the completed lesson. So this stage actually prompts reflection for action when a teacher analyzes instruction after the lesson, reconceptualizes his or her assumptions about the learners and their progress, and plans for the next lesson, anticipating challenges, predicting responses, and preparing accordingly. And who would be engaged in reflective teaching? Of course, pre-service teachers who are engaged in micro-teaching in class and practicum in undergraduate programs, and in-service teachers who participate in institutional training or professional development opportunities. And of course, any novice or experienced teacher who is interested in understanding their teaching practice better by examining it closely with the intention of improving their teaching performance and effectiveness would be involved in reflective teaching. Who helps these teachers with their reflective teaching? Of course, again, their peers, like their fellow pre-service teachers or their colleagues, their students, their in-service trainers or pre-service mentors, university supervisors, they're all there for the teachers. These people become a community of practice for the reflective practitioner, as Schoen calls it. They share ideas, bounce ideas back and forth, give feedback to each other to enhance the teaching and learning experience. Saunders and Wong, 2020, give us this, general checklist. If you take a look at this one, with some guiding questions. These are very easy to adapt actually for reflection. They have 4 steps for this framework. The first one is the description. This is the description of the teaching incident. What happened? What did others do? What was my affect? And, how did we feel? What was happening around us? So the first thing is just identifying the incident. Then the analysis and interpretation of why this incident happened. Why did this happen? Why did I behave this way? Why did I maybe act that way? What else might have contributed to this incident? Just understanding what was going on. Then meaning and implication, like the significance of this incident. Why is this significant? What have I learned from this? How could I improve this? The so what, step of this. And finally, the last step is implications for action. So what do we do now? This is the now what stage. And that is the stage where we do plans for change in the future. So I think this is a nice framework. How do teachers go about with reflective practice then? What tools or types of activities are available for teachers to engage in reflective teaching? Carroll, 2021, suggests that teachers may engage in their own bottom-up reflections through reflection generating activities. And the examples that he gives here are classroom observations, like using ethnographic field notes or audio video recordings of their lessons. Teachers can examine whether there's convergence between their actions, decisions, and practices in the classroom and their beliefs and perceptions about what they do in the classroom. So in other words, the teachers discover whether what they say they do in class is actually what happens in the lesson. Sometimes we may be misled, or we may have a different perception of what we're doing in the classroom, and we might be sometimes surprised by watching our own performance. Then teaching portfolios are another activity. This is a collection of information about, a teacher's practice. It tells the story of the teacher's efforts, skills, abilities, achievements, etc. A teaching portfolio may include lesson plans, anecdotal records, student projects, class newsletters, videotapes, annual evaluations, and letters of recommendations, such kinds of things. Then there's reflective writing. That's another activity teachers may engage in to gain new understandings of their own instructional practices. So reflective writing can include written accounts of teachers' thoughts, classroom observations, assumptions, their beliefs, their attitudes, and their experiences about their own their practice. And the modes, for reflective writing, depending on what they prefer, of course, the preferences of the teachers, they may be in the form of teachers' journals or online platforms like blogs, chats, forums, YouTube channel, again, for teachers too. Then another activity is action research. That is a systematic investigation of specific classroom problems with the aim of finding a solution to these issues. So teachers inquire their own teaching practice through a cyclical process that involves planning, which is identifying the problem, researching, that's the literature review, observing the classroom, collecting data, reflecting, analyzing this data, and acting. That's redefining the problem, finding solutions to the problem, trying these solutions to the problem, and seeing how it ends. Then we have teacher narratives. These are teacher-generated accounts of the teacher's professional life story. These are more personal, actually. These oral and written accounts offer valuable information for the teacher because they are usually emotionally driven, and they may be infused with interpretation. They remind the teacher of, the emotions and thoughts at a certain point in their practice, something that, that they can try to understand, explain, and work on through critical reflection. And finally, we have a lesson study. This is a collaborative action. It's a community of practice consisting of teachers working together to plan and teach various lessons collaboratively. In a lesson study, a team of teachers plan a lesson together. One of the teachers delivers the lesson, and after the lesson, the team again gets together to discuss their observations. After the group discussions, the team revisits the lesson, based on the feedback and observation, and revised lesson plan may be implemented either to the same group of students or to a different group of students. So these are some really practical suggestions that Carol has for us. Now we move on to reflective training. Student teachers are engaged in what Lorty, 1975, calls an apprenticeship of observation. I really like this concept. It always reminds me of my own childhood too, and the traumas of being in primary school. And in our times, we used to get our ears held like this and maybe pinched a little bit, and even in private schools there were a lot of incidents like that. Anyway, so students and student teachers, actually, they learn about teaching from the teachers that they have had during their education life. So they form ideas about how to teach and what good teaching is and isn't, as students. So, but forming an opinion about teaching and teachers doesn't really prepare them for actual teaching practice. Therefore, teacher trainers, mentors, teacher educators provide formal support and instruction to enhance the teaching practice of trainee teachers. There are three models of teacher education in formal training. One is the craft model. So here the trainer is the role model. The trainee imitates the trainer. Then there's the applied science model. All teaching problems may be solved by experts in content knowledge rather than practitioners. And then there's the reflective model. The final outcome of training in this model is being autonomous. The teachers being autonomous, being capable of constant self-reflection, which leads to continuous process of professional self-development. Of course, our focus is on this last one. The effectiveness and helpfulness of reflective teacher education has been reported in a number of studies, as you may see on the right hand column over here, to have a good to be effective and of course helpful for the classroom teachers. In one such study that I conducted in Ankara with my practicum students, the pre-service teachers reported that reflecting on their teaching practice and receiving feedback from their peers and supervisor about their videotaped lessons before their graded performance, we call that assessed teaching, eased their anxiety and boosted their self-confidence. So that is actually something that I can vouch for personally too. So reflection and training may take place during pre-service teacher education or in-service teacher training. During pre-service teacher education, the university supervisor and the mentor teacher at the cooperating school can observe and give feedback to the student teachers, the trainees. The trainees examine their class videos and discuss ways of improving their teaching performance. A similar procedure is followed in in-service teacher training. Of course, the trainer observes the lesson, takes notes, reflects on the lesson with the trainee. If possible, they look at taped sessions together and exchange ideas about what went on in the lesson and ways to enhance the teaching. Another reflective training activity is reflection on the training itself. So the trainer as the reflective practitioner here. So teacher educators, mentor teachers and teacher trainers, they must practice what they preach and hold, of course, themselves accountable to the same criteria to which they hold the trainees, which is difficult. It's very easy to evaluate, give grades, give feedback. But of course, it has to be in such a way that we're doing the same thing ourselves if we are in that position. Therefore, they need to inquire critically and reflectively into their own practice every now and then. So for this reflection, they may focus on their own teaching performance in class and also on their training sessions where they're giving feedback and exchanging ideas with trainees. Trainees, other trainers or mentors and students may provide feedback and suggestions for the trainer. In a case study conducted by Harrison, Lawson, and Wortley, 3 mentor teachers were involved in such an action research project. The mentors' overall involvement in the action research project, as well as their application of the reflective teaching strategies provided, had a significant impact on their ability to bring about a change in their own practice. These are the reported results. So these mentors moved from adopting a mostly telling, coaching, guiding kind of mentoring to a more inquiry, co-inquiry, and reflective kind of training that helped for them. So how could training be reflective? What are some tools and procedures available to trainers and supervisors in order to conduct such systematic reflection? Reflective training may be in the form of reflection generating activities as collaborative teacher evaluation and mentorship, critical friends, team teaching, peer coaching. Again, according to Farrell. So trainers or members of the teams or communities of practice, they may watch videotaped teaching performances of trainees in stimulated recall sessions, reflecting on the minute-by-minute incidents of the lesson and talk about those. So trainers here and trainees have a chance to express their intentions and their thoughts, what was going on in their minds during the lesson and get feedback from the trainer. The trainers, they try to understand the reasoning behind the momentary choices of the trainees and adjust their feedback accordingly by trying to be flexible and tolerant maybe with their criticism. So if, given the chance, sometimes, for example, we tell our students, always use English in class. And then we observe their class and we hear them speak Turkish at some point. So when we're talking to our students, they may justify their use of Turkish, and we may say, okay, that makes sense. All right, so that was a good call. So we may actually, instead of saying you shouldn't have used Turkish, we give them a chance to justify that choice, and then modify our feedback accordingly. So such sessions actually clarify the needs, level of awareness, strengths, and weaknesses of the trainees, and it gives feedback providers an opportunity to contribute to the enhancement of the trainees' teaching practice. So the group may also follow the observation notes and the evaluation criteria for teaching performances to assess the trainees' performance together. So let us look at a few examples of such observation forms and criteria, some forms that they can follow, something that is standard, that might be shared with other team members, other mentors and stuff. So for example, trainees may fill out a form like this one that has open-ended questions. And after their teaching, or even better, after watching themselves teach on video, they may comment on the aspects that they were happy with in their class, the problems that they encountered, and maybe why they thought this happened, if they had a mentor teacher or a trainer, what they said during the feedback session, and if they had the opportunity to change something, what would it be? So they can actually feel free to write in such a form. Or mentor teachers in cooperating schools may fill out a form like this one, for example. While watching our trainees, the student teachers in practicum, following the criteria on the form gives the mentor teachers a framework to focus on, and guiding points to talk about during their feedback sessions. Of course, following a form may be more critical for the mentor teachers at cooperating schools, especially in public schools in Turkey, because they may not be engaged in reflection as often as, for example, university supervisors or teacher trainers may be. I mean, I know that the Ministry of National Education is trying to provide training sessions for teachers, public school teachers, but I'm not really sure how sufficient they are in providing reflective training opportunities for them. And I'm being very polite. Okay, and this form here, it may be used by all stakeholders in the practicum or in-service training program. It's very general, but it also has some very specific points to focus on. It gives the feedback provider some guidelines and focus points for reflection. They can look at the classroom procedures and lesson planning, self-presentation, classroom persona, and classroom management issues. And in the end, have enough room. You don't actually see the enough room here, but they have an open-ended question over here. They can write their comments over here. Okay, now in the end, I would like to sum up what we have talked about so far. So giving and receiving regular and systematic feedback is useful in enhancing learning and teaching practice, as also proven by research and literature. Self-evaluation through reflection for all stakeholders, learners, teachers, trainers, it's powerful as a self-discovery and self-improvement tool for learners, teachers, and trainers, for everybody. Reflective feedback helps all these stakeholders in the learning and teaching setting, including learners, teachers, trainees, mentors, supervisors, and trainers, everybody that's involved in learning and teaching. And showing, instead of telling the trainees, how their lesson went during the feedback sessions, is essential in making our comments clear. Therefore, videos, detailed notes, observation criteria are crucial. They're very important tools for reflective teaching and training. Okay, so this actually is the end of my talk. These are my references. And I would like to end with a quote from John Dewey. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. Thank you very much for listening to me and attending the seminar. If you have any questions, if you would like to contact me, I would be happy to share the rubrics with you also. So if anybody has any comments, please go ahead and provide them for me. Hocam, I'm going to stop sharing now.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Betil Hocam. It was a wonderful
Welcome.
talk.
Thank you.
Very compact. You summarized everything. I was so scared when you said you were going to cover all three aspects of this. I said she won't be able to finish it in time, but you created a miracle here.
Thank you.
In fact, you somehow touched upon each and every important piece of information here. Tan Arda Gedik Hocam is raising his hand. So would you like to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask? By the way, I was going to thank you again for this great talk.
Oh, Hocam, you're most welcome. It was my pleasure.
Okay. Yes, Tan Hocam.
Hi, good evening, Betil Hocam. It is so nice to see you. Thank you so much.
It's very nice to see you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful talk. It is really nice to see all of this in a very compact manner. Your presentation reminds me of one thing, and then I have a question. So when it comes to reflective training, I think that's where you mentioned it. The concepts you mentioned in that subsection really reminds me of some of the concepts that are mentioned in posthumanism, where we talk about becoming one with the student, especially posthuman education. Now, it is clearly not my field yet. I'm trying to dip my toes in it, if you will. Yeah. But this is definitely something we as a community should look into in the future. And my question is, I think you mentioned the use of technology with students when it comes to reflection. And I was wondering whether it is possible to use corpora. I know it is possible to use corpora in classrooms, but is it possible to use it in a reflective manner is my question.
Probably that's actually a very good question. You mean like language corpora?
Yeah, but also I guess any native speaker corpus or corpora for that matter.
You could, well, I don't know if you could use them as classroom materials. You could, I guess. You could also refer students to these corpora. Some of the issues that we have, so we have like corpus like, for example, the American National Corpus, the ANC. Then we have the British National Corpus, the BNC. You can actually tell students what these are and tell them you can go and find different, types of conversations in British English. Sometimes the problem with corpora is that they are too natural. So students sometimes may have difficulty following the different varieties within corpora. So I wouldn't not recommend them, but I would definitely keep a close eye on what the students are learning from these. I'm thinking about, for example, the Turkish corpus, the spoken Turkish corpus that late Shukriye Hocam and we were working on. And we had Turkish dialects from all over Turkey. And there were some audio files that I didn't understand, as a Turkish speaker. So I cannot imagine referring learners of Turkish to that and say, you can go and find nice Turkish dialogues there. So, I would say maybe carefully and selectively, you may use corpora.
Let me specify.
Tan Hocam, I really missed your point here. Could you please clarify your question?
Or maybe I missed your point.
Yeah, I will.
Well, when you said, can we use corpora for reflective teaching or for reflective training, how do you mean?
Okay. So not for training, let me get this straight, but more so for teaching. So let me re-specify this question. Maybe it'll help out.
Please.
Yeah. So for instance, if we're talking about reflective learning, say for instance, we're teaching if conditionals, right? And I presented a paper today where apparently, at least in Germany, the textbooks in Germany, they do not reflect the real life usage of if conditionals when compared against the BNC. So take, for instance, we're teaching the if conditionals, and then our students use those if conditionals somehow. And then can we refer them to the corpus and tell them to look for if conditionals and then reflect on their usage, on their own usage of if conditionals for that matter? Because apparently what textbooks tell us, and this is also the case in Turkey as well, I did a mini corpus study on that, we get type 1, type 2 a lot, but when it comes to type 3, for instance, nothing. And then mixed conditionals,
Tanojam, you're giving me a heart attack.
Why?
If conditionals, the moment you said it, I felt like killing myself, because this is a huge battlefield in Turkey right now. We are trying to leave these grammar jargon viruses behind.
Okay.
So rather than saying if conditionals, we talk about possibilities, results, what happens, so it is more functional grammar rather than structural grammar. So please, I don't know where you study, but please, I beg you, do not use those grammatical terms in my session, please.
Okay,
Because I'm really getting, see how nervous I get when I hear these jargon things.
I'm sorry to have caused a heart attack. I did graduate from Metsu, but I would rather, and I was a student of hers as well, but I would rather consider myself a usage-based construction grammar and a linguist because I haven't been able to teach for the past 2 years. So I'm more of a theorist than a practitioner, but when the time comes, I will have to teach one way or another. So that's why I'm asking this question. But sorry to
no, I'm just joking. But just Tanojam, please keep in mind that use is always more important than usage.
Of course.
Use should be your starting point. I'm sorry, Betil Eröz, I took the stage here, and corpus studies, in my opinion, are for upper intermediate, B2+, C1 level learners. Corpus studies are too complex for lower level students to deal with. And they are wonderful references for teachers as well. What should I teach in the classroom? Which clause should I use? Which sentence should I use? Which vocabulary items should I use? That is wonderful. But I still don't know, or still cannot imagine, how to use corpora for reflective learning. Because reflection is more like sitting down and thinking about what you have accomplished and what you want to accomplish more. Betil Hocam, correct me if I'm wrong.
Hocam, of course, I see this as part of becoming autonomous, just going after what you're trying to find and using corpora as a resource, for language. So
we are on the same page. So it's more like for reference or resource.
Corpora is, again, you may not always find what you're looking for in that very specific way. So it might be a bit discouraging for students. And there's a lot of colloquial use, a lot of daily language, a lot of, like false starts and hedges. And so, corpora is full of language, let's say, language from daily life, and as I said, a bit too natural. So teaching grammar, like very specific structure, and leading students to corpora or a specific corpus, that wouldn't be something that I would do. For example, that would be the last thing that I would think. I would just go to Google and try and find some grammar resources in order to teach some grammar points. So I would have like appropriate examples so that the students would understand that. But of course, the usage part, so the pragmatic context in which, you know, a certain grammar point is used, that would be the next step, where the students will be familiar with the grammar point and then they will see it in context. Then I think using corpora or referring them to corpora would be meaningful and helpful for the students. But maybe, I think as Aydan Hocam just said, maybe just the upper level students.
Yeah.
So
Amanda Hocam has a remark here. Amanda Hocam, would you like to unmute yourself and express your opinion?
Yeah, Jen,
you're here.
I was just saying, yeah, sort of going on with the corpora thing there, is that a lot of authentic language use isn't always teachable. It's not always accessible for students. And they may not always be able to use it in their everyday life. I would agree that corpora studies would be more useful for the higher level of students, the C1, C2 level, where rather than learning new chunks of language, they're learning how to express meaning in different kinds of ways and everything. So I think at those kind of levels where the students are working on proficiency, at least, and maybe sounding more natural, they will be quite useful. For lower levels, definitely not. But yeah, we've got to remember the whole thing about authentic language as used by native speakers it doesn't always have the quality of being worth teaching.
That's a wonderful statement, Amanda. True.
Yes. I mean, it's the whole thing about language. It's just the surface, isn't it? It's part of this a much deeper context there. And when we see, especially spoken language, if we take that spoken language away from its deeper context, it can be words, single words, a couple of words together. It can even be just incomprehensible grunts even. So I think we've got to be careful, but it's certainly those higher levels where they can see definitely there. So I mean, I think for us, we've got to think about, is this language teachable? It's authentic, it should be used by native speakers, but is it worth teaching? That's my idea there.
But still, it's a great idea. Of course, Tan Hocam has what Tan Hocam has mentioned. It can be a great resource for higher level learners. I use it myself as a higher level learner. I'm still learning. There is no end to this learning the language thing, and like any language, English is a killer. Well, Turkish is even worse, but still, I'm doing my best. My daughters, for example, are still teaching me some Turkish, the new version.
Oh yeah, the new version, the new generation.
Oh yeah, oh my God, yeah, and the terms that they use, they're like it's a totally different language. But it's a very good point, and as Betil Hocam has said, I guess it's not possible to say that it is for anything to be impossible to use in the language classroom. Everything is a possibility. You can use everything. However, you need to be very careful when you're dealing with lower level students, A1, A2, B1 students. Do you really want to get into this highly authentic language? We all watch movies, right? They don't even make a full sentence without using the F word. Do we really want to teach that statement in the classroom? Well, whatever. Betil Hocam, I have a question for you. Is it a question? I don't know. It's more like, what do you think kind of thing? This reflection, especially for training, can be for pre-service or in-service teachers. If it's self-reflection, it does not get very hurtful, because sometimes we hide the facts, right? like you said, because of our ego, we cannot see actually what is happening in the classroom. But when it comes to peer reflection, what kind of language would you advise to use when we are reflecting on our peers' practice? Can you give me a 1 sentence or 2 sentence example, for example?
Hocam, I'll talk about, how I handle some language usage issues among students. Sometimes, I think it has to do with pragmatic competence, not more like not knowing what is polite and what is political. So students sometimes they may be brutal to each other. So I think to prevent that, to take precautions is important, like before the feedback sessions, for example, telling students, one, be honest. You're not here to praise each other. So it was a great presentation is not feedback. Okay, it's just like getting rid of that person, just shrugging them off. So, but that sucked is not appropriate, even if the presentation really, really was bad. So we have to find a middle ground. That's why I suggest using rubrics, because the rubrics already have language in them. So the students can take a look at a rubric and say, your voice was not clear enough, or it was not high, it's right there. They can use the language of the rubrics. So analytical rubrics that give descriptions will help students, because people are not born as feedback givers. It's something that is learned. You have to practice with that. And you don't want students to hurt each other's feelings and, just demotivate each other. And you don't also want people to give this false sense of achievement to each other. And then everybody's saying this was a perfect presentation and you're giving the student a C, then you have a problem.
Okay.
In my class, I want to look nicer to the students now.
Okay.
So giving them language through the rubrics is something that I would suggest.
Okay, so excellent point. It is safer to stick to a rubric because culturally, honestly speaking, we don't know how to give feedback. We don't know how to reflect on anything.
No, it's not part of our, it's not part of our educational culture. Everybody likes giving advice.
Well, educational culture or any culture. We love criticizing. We love it. And it's mostly destructive criticism, including me. I'm not saying that I'm innocent. I'm not, definitely. You know that I'm a queen of sarcasm myself.
Me too. I know. That's why we get along. So, but of course, feedback is very critical. And
I know. You should watch my video on YouTube channel. You would be so proud of me saying how careful we need to be when we use the language of feedback. But normally, I kill the student in front of me. Well, but I just wanted to get your opinion to help our colleagues, because most probably they are not as harsh as we are. So they would like to stick to rubrics to be able to make more objective and fair sentences without being accusational or, I don't know, negatively critical.
Yeah, overcritical, that does not help, Hocam. It just demotivates people. Anybody, So there are ways of saying things.
Okay. My dear colleagues, do you have any questions? I don't know what happened to Tan Hoca. Did we upset him?
No.
upset
Yeah,
you?
he had to feed his cats. I think that's what he wrote. So he left.
Oh, okay.
He wrote a note. He said
Oh, okay.
before he left.
Right. I'm sorry, I missed that. What kind of a moderator am I? Shame on me.
I just had a chance to look at the comments. So thank you very much, everybody, for your very nice comments.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very good, nice talk. So everyone is thanking you, of course. Yes. Volkan Hocam, better late than sorry. So don't be sorry to
Recorded
be late.
anyway.
Yes, it is recorded. So if you're interested, definitely you can watch it next week on our YouTube channel. I guess we don't have any questions or any comments.
Aydan Hocam,
Yes, Şebnem Hocam.
we have to give punishment to Volkan Hoca.
Really? Don't do
Yes.
that. Poor
Yeah,
guy.
I
I
will.
mean,
I will.
he
I will
works late. Don't do that. Don't.
Okay.
Please. Well, I like Volkan Hoca a lot, and he works so hard. Don't be harsh on him.
Okay.
See, this is how colleagues treat each other. See, this is what we are dealing with. Guys, thank you very much for joining our session. Betil Hocam, thanks a million, because
Hocam,
it
you're
was a wonderful, excellent summary of all the important points. And it's going to be a very good addition to our collection on our YouTube channel. Anyone who's interested in getting a brief summary, but the most important points of reflection, they will definitely watch this video.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hopefully, we'll get you again next term, maybe. You never
Whenever you
know.
want, Hocam.
After the summer holiday, if we can
course.
ever get one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's hope.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
continue.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. I wish you all the best and hope to see you next week again. Love you all. Take care.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Hocam.